This is Software Meets Business, a podcast sponsored by Head Channel.
Welcome to another episode of Software Meets Business. And today I'm very excited to have with me Mark Doyle, co-founder at A Life in a Day. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Rich, how you doing?
Good. So wanted to get you on the podcast because you are someone who has gone through the process of building your own software and building a very successful product using software developers. And I just wanted to really start off by kind of understanding your journey on how you got to where you are today. So how did it all get started?
So thanks very much for asking me on to do this. And it's been really interesting to sort of reflect on the journey and preparation for this. I'm going to go right back to the beginning, if that's okay, because I definitely didn't start with any intention of getting into software. I actually started my professional career as an actor many years ago. I worked with a theatre company and had a film company with my business partner, John, who's a writer-director. And in the early 2000s, we kind of looked at each other and said, this is wonderful, all this creative stuff we're doing, but it would be nice to maybe monetize it some way at some point in the future. So we set up a company with the intention of using our creative expertise to develop immersive learning experiences.
So that was that like a group, everyone comes together and then you teach them to be immersive? I don't know what I'm saying.
The first company that we set up, The Method, which is still running today, it's 20 years old, that uses actors' techniques and skills to help people communicate more effectively in business. But our approach to developing the workshops and the tools and the skills to equip people with the ability to do that has always been immersive. It's always been about interaction, getting people to try new things in different ways. So, I'll be honest, when we set up the business, I'd never really set foot in an office before. So we had no business experience. I didn't really know what the word business meant. We had no product, just a notion that we could probably do something. We had no clients whatsoever. So the first couple of years were really just us working out what does it mean to have a business and where on earth do we fit? So it took a while for us to develop the product, but we were always interested in immersion, always interested in interactivity and getting people to try new things through doing. So the method was a really successful and different way of entering the sort of training and development world, I guess. And we ended up working quite a lot with the pharmaceutical sector, who do lots of investment with their people in their personal development. And around 2015, one of our clients came to us and said, in the healthcare sector now, there is a growing need for us to better understand patients. At the moment, we specialize in understanding the drug. We understand the molecule. We understand the clinical side, but we probably don't really understand the people as much as we should, but we really would like to. So we were given the challenge of, could we create an immersive simulation where people working in the company could experience what it might be like to live with a specific condition or disease for 24 hours. So that was the original brief. And the first condition we worked on was Crohn's disease, which is a gastrointestinal chronic condition. We thought that was just an unbelievably fascinating brief to say, yes, could you do it? So we were actually initially only brought in to sort of help write some of the types of challenges and role plays that might occur across the 24-hour period. We weren't expected to develop any software. But the product that evolved, which has subsequently become A Life in a Day, uses three different component parts to deliver that experience to people. So there's an interactive app. So from the moment you wake up, when you take part in one of the A Life in a Day experiences, the app sends you challenges, directions, dilemmas that get you to think about how you're going to behave as a patient and really crucially get you to behave and act like a patient. On top of that, we then have role play. So throughout the day, you get actors phoning you who take on the role of people you might interact with if you were someone living with a particular condition. So you talk to a nurse, you talk to a doctor, you might talk to your boss even, who might give you a great work opportunity, but it could be compromised because of your health condition. And we also send out a kit of items that you open and use through the day. So we can have medical props, maybe fake medication, but we also have some wearables to simulate sensations that you might feel. We have bloods, we have smells, we have mucus, we have whatever it takes to kind of immerse you in what it might be like to feel like a patient. So the idea is by the end of 24 hours, you act like a patient because the app tells you what to do. You have conversations like a patient because you get these calls from the role players, and you feel some of the sensations a patient might experience because of the kit items. And the idea is you don't stop what you're doing. You go to work as normal while all of this is happening. But by the end, you've had this sort of immersive insight into what it might be like to be a patient.
That's really interesting. And sort of, I suppose for most people, they wouldn't have thought that there was kind of a need for this. But like you said earlier, pharmaceutical companies have people, they know the molecule, but they don't actually connect with the people that they're trying to serve with that molecule.
That's right. And I think if you look back in time, you'd apply that across healthcare. So not just the pharmaceutical industry, but, doctors, nurses. The focus used to be very much on treat the disease, not the person. And that's really radically altered in the last 20 years, but certainly accelerated enormously in the last 10 years. And COVID, I think, we're putting our understanding, where access to understanding healthcare needs and wanting to make different decisions as people living with different conditions is radically altered. So it's vital that the industry as a whole, the healthcare sector as a whole, has a better understanding of the people behind the condition.
Originally, you got involved to write some challenges.
That's it.
But then that evolved into, oh, actually, why don't we deliver those challenges via a software platform? Is that what happened? Was that a conversation?
Yeah, kind of. So what happened, as I say, originally it was working with a single client, and we were working on a single disease, which was the Crohn's disease with them. And as we were doing it, it was so incredibly well received right from the outset that we sort of went, I think there's something in this, and I think there's the opportunity to do this for multiple different conditions. If it works with Crohn's, then why shouldn't it work with type 2 diabetes? Why shouldn't it work with respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and so on? So we came to sort of an agreement with the client that said, okay, you can go. They didn't have a particular interest in making multiple conditions. So they said, yeah, you can take the concept and build it on your own. And at that time, there was an existing app, but we had no access to that. That was owned by them. So they said, but you're going to have to build your own tools. So now it was up to us to create the app side of it. So we were already pretty adept at the role play. That wasn't an issue. That's very much our background. But now we needed to make the software. So the good news was we'd had an incredible sort of starting point to see what we wanted it to do, what worked, and there'd also been a couple of iterations from the original program, so we also knew what we didn't want it to do. However, suddenly I was developing a piece of software with nobody within the business with any of that expertise, and certainly none from me from a technical point of view. So I knew the outcome, or I thought I knew the outcome of what we wanted, but I had no idea about how to then work with a software development company to make that a reality.
Did you even know that you needed a software development company at that point? Did you?
Yes, I'd seen the development of the original app, or I'd been adjacent to it, I think is probably the best way. So I'd sort of been in the same room as they were having discussions, because obviously we were writing the content that would go into that application. So I'd sort of seen it, and then so here's the thing, in the original, what was happening was we were coming up with ideas, writing the ideas, giving it to the app people, and they were putting it in the app. And then we'd come up with a better idea, or we'd run the program and go, hey, why don't we do it like this? And the team would write a new idea, a new challenge, and then we'd go to the software developers and go, can you put that in? And time would disappear and money would disappear, and eventually it would be changed. And I was like, one thing I know we want to do is make that process quicker. And at that stage, I didn't want to bring it in-house. I felt like it was a safer and more sensible option to find a partner rather than to bring a huge team in-house. So my brief because it was Head Channel right from day one, this is back in 2018, the brief was, you've got to make a piece of software where the creative writers can edit it instantly without the need for technical interaction. I don't want to come to a developer every time I want to change some text. So you need to create something that's entirely editable. And my actual brief was like, it's got to be used by an idiot. And I meant me. I've got to be able to update it instantly because I have no technical skills. I'm not going to learn how to code. You've got to create something that I can change the content instantly and easily.
Okay. And so that was the brief. And so what was the kind of when you engaged? Was there an initial meeting or?
We wrote what I now look back on and go was a terrible, terrible brief. Because I knew what I wanted, I wrote it down in a way that I understood. But I realised there's an enormous amount of information that was missing in that brief. So I put together a brief, which was then interpreted. A response was given by Head Channel. We selected Head Channel because they gave a really strong response to it. But then the real work obviously began. So we sat down and had an initial meeting, and it became clear almost instantly what an enormous gap there was between my understanding of the outcome and what the process would need to be to get us there.
How did you choose Head Channel? Did you just type in into the search someone to build me an app, or?
That's actually a good question. It must have been a recommendation. It must have been a recommendation. So we went to 3 different companies, and I think I had some form of recommendation or introduction to each of those companies. So it definitely wasn't a Google search. We put the brief out. By the time the sort of responses came in, I at that point had a new client and we had a 6-month deadline. So the decision was made very, very quickly. I'll be honest, largely based on price. I also liked the guys at Head Channel very much from the meeting. So it was based on who I liked and thought I could work with and the cost fit. So it was there. What I didn't do and what I would absolutely do now is get somebody to help me do that brief who's got technical understanding. I didn't know what questions to ask. I just went, hey, this is the thing. Now, as you know, we have a fractional CTO and we have some in-house people that anytime we come up with a new proposal, we're both hopefully asking better questions, but also analysing your responses in a much more diligent way. But the first set of decisions was made quite quickly.
So that if you look back at that original brief and then the original meeting, what was the gap between what you'd written and the?
We had a sort of a full day meeting, I think, and throughout the day I was like, it became really clear to me that I'd misunderstood how difficult and complex that this might be. Because as an end user, I understood the outcome, but I was like, I think this is pretty straightforward. We've done it before. There's a living example of it, so we just want it like that, but a bit better. Was my kind of naive view. And I also think it's fair to say, you maybe need to tell me, I think what we were asking was kind of unique and different at the time. I mean, there's nothing else out there like A Life and a Day to this day that uses this interaction of live interaction with a physical set of items that you're sent and an app. It's also something that goes over a 24-hour period, and we needed to be able to interact live during that 24-hour period. And once it's done, that's the experience over. The app doesn't live on. So I'll tell you, in that first meeting, I think even that understanding hadn't been clear. I think the team had thought that it was an app that you download and use multiple times. And actually, in practice, it's actually a live event. You do it once, you do it for the 24 hours. So even that, in the first day, I was like, oh, wow, there is a real gulf in understanding here of what we're going to get to.
Because you're just looking at, the end result. You're in those meetings with the previous version, with the developers from the previous version, and that previous version, worked in a certain way, and it just seemed really simple. But yeah, once you take what you're building now and you break it apart, actually it gets quite complicated because you've got pathways going on in all of that as well. It's not just, it's an event that's then built over the 24-hour period. Different things happen.
We currently have 33 different experiences in 33 different therapy areas, different conditions or diseases. And we're going to massively increase that amount. There's still lots more to do. So what I knew I wanted was I didn't want to create 33 different apps. I didn't want a different app for each different therapy area. What I wanted was a way where the writing team in the background could use a piece of software to create the experience for type 2 diabetes. And then we would be able to press a button and say, okay, when people download the app from the App Store, they can put in the code that will make sure they get the type 1 diabetes experience. the people that are going to go on the cardiovascular disease experience, they're going to download the same app, put in a different code and get that. So I wanted a single app that was going to function as a template and a piece of software behind it to allow us to do that. And yeah, I guess what I now realize is that was kind of complex. There wasn't anything existing that the team could necessarily draw on to make that occur.
And you probably came up a little bit against assumptions as well, because I think, from a technical team's point of view, they get this brief in, they go, oh yeah, you need a scheduler, and the app's going to be open over a number of days or weeks or whatever, and these things are going to happen. And then suddenly you're like, oh well, actually no, it's all in 24 hours. And the scheduler is actually incredibly complicated behind the scenes, because
it's incredibly complex.
Yeah, it's not a and there's nothing else that exists like it.
Yeah, and we wanted the ability to edit everything instantly. And we wanted the ability to edit it and for the person using it in that 24 hours to instantly receive a change.
Yeah.
We wanted the ability to have live interactions, and it must be incredibly fluid, and to sort of have all those complex things happening in real time for multiple different therapy areas. And we deliver it to 55 countries in 13 different languages at the moment. So there was an awful lot of needs to accommodate.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, you've got the development team, you've had the initial meeting. What happened next? Did you get a deliverable? Was it the curtains parted, and here it is, here's the first version? Or was it much more a case of an iterative approach? And did you choose that? Did you choose to go iterative, or
I didn't have the vocabulary then even to ask for that. So, I guess what happened was we had a series of conversations. We felt like we got to a place of shared understanding. Then there was a period of time where the developers went, okay, let's go and make something. And in hindsight, I was talking actually to a member of the team that was there this week about it. I think it was actually it was a reasonable amount of time before we saw anything. And bear in mind, we're on a 6 month.
You've got a hard deadline.
Yeah. Creeping up for a brand new client, for a brand new experience. And so I guess it was a couple of months. They then sort of presented something back to us, and it actually looked great. It looked great. But that's when you sort of went, okay, the functions that we're needing here are incredibly complex, and wow, there's an awful lot of things that are not working as we want them to, not working at all, or there's a huge amount of discrepancy into what I meant by that function and to what you've interpreted as that function. So we went into I'd say a panic mode then, which lasted
screaming, running around with your hands in the air, panic mode.
There was some screaming. There definitely was some screaming. Not immediately, but definitely there was some screaming. And so the structure at the time was still very much. I definitely wasn't dealing directly with developers. I definitely was talking to a project manager who was the kind of person between myself and the developers, which is great and quite right, because to interpret my needs for the needs of the developers is the right way. But just the gap in the amount of room there is for misinterpretation is just phenomenal. And to this day, this, Rich, we've had this not too long ago where we've put together what we thought was quite a clear ask. And it's so easy to be misinterpreted. And if you don't have a constant, clear, iterative response, is this what you meant? Is this what you meant? It even now can spin out of control very quickly.
I think that's a really important learning, because I think people don't realize that the more feedback, the quicker the feedback loop is, the more feedback there is, the more you can glide that project, that deliverable into exactly the right place.
Yeah, and to the extreme detail. The conversations we've had, like, why have you put that in the left-hand corner? Surely it's clearly obvious that it should go in the right-hand corner with the other tools that do that. Sorry, not a clear example, but in my mind, sometimes it's so blindingly obvious. But of course it isn't. Yes. It's only blindingly obvious to me, or it's perfectly reasonable to come up with a different conclusion to me. But so the need to constantly show everything. And have a robust tool or mechanism to do that. So we didn't. We had ad hoc meetings where something would be shown and we had no process. We didn't have clear times and structures around that initially. We do now. Now I think we have a fantastic series of tools and ways of communicating, but we didn't have any of that in place. So yes, screaming occurred.
I think that's the thing. A lot of people who never gone on the journey of building software and then hire a team don't have perhaps well, they don't know what they don't know. They don't appreciate that you have to have a way of working and and that has to evolve with the team that you're working with, because in the context of the team that you're working with. And if you don't have that, and there is no feedback loops, you can't just get to the end and it turn up and it looks nice, but then when you try and use it, suddenly you discover that the functionality that you thought was obvious isn't quite as obvious.
That's right. Yeah.
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 So
And also, it's interesting. I was also working. You just used the word when you get to the end. I was working to an end point in my mind, and this is so naive, and I'm sure whoever's listening to this will not be this naive. But at the point when I started, my assumption was we would do a 6 months to 8 months contract, maybe a little longer with some snags, and that would be it. We'd say thanks very much. We'll come back if and when we ever need to change it. And I had been told, I'd definitely been told by Head Channel, it probably isn't going to be like that. It's probably going to need some maintenance and some thinking going forward, and you should plan for that. And I was like, no. I know what it needs to be. It's going to function like this. The functions won't change. We just need to get it finished. And I think it took 3 years to get close to what I would consider to be finished. And we're still working on it now, but now we're improving. I think it's 3 to 4 years to finish that first brief, if I'm really honest. And then it's now continually improving and changing.
yeah,
And that was so that I got massively wrong.
and sometimes I have to, I've just done it just now. Languages are really very subtle differences in language, and by saying the end, but software never ends. There is no finish. It lives. The only end comes when you decommission it and you switch it off, and then it doesn't need anything. It does become more stable over time.
Yes, that's true.
Which is certainly a nice place to be in after you've got through the earlier days. So look, right. So you got the first deliverable. You all ran around with your hair on fire, but you had this 6 months coming up. So what happened? Was there a crunch?
Yeah, we didn't hit the targets. The main barrier was actually getting it approved on the App Store. I can't remember the specifics of why, but it got pushed back from Apple. By the way, we were working on Apple and Android simultaneously, but it was made clear right from very early on we're never going to meet Android. So we moved just to Apple, to iOS. And we missed it. So we ended up with that first client of that first pilot for the first client, actually getting them on test flight was the only way that we could manage to get through it. And it was fine because we had enough time to build towards that. It was only a pilot initially, so that was also fine. And what I would say in that period was the team worked so hard. I mean, they did everything to get it there. That was really important. So there was screaming, but underneath it, there was also this incredible sort of respect for just how important it was for them to be successful for us. And I think where I've always thought I've made a brilliant decision with Head Channel was that everyone's cared. And again, I didn't make that part of my selection criteria at all, but I definitely would in the future. Is that team going to crawl over hot coals to get that delivered? Because that's what happened. I think we were quite a big-ish client from the start in a relatively small company at the time. And that really worked in our favour when our backs were up against the wall.
There's a lot of teams out there that will go above and beyond to get something finished, because they do feel when you've been working on a project for so long, you want to get it over the line because you kind of professional pride, right? In making it happen. It's good to hear that happened. I mean, obviously, the best thing is to run at a sustainable pace and not have the crunch situations. But these things do happen.
Absolutely, and we were in startup. I mean, we were really in startup mode, and although we didn't explicitly ask that, the team came with us on that journey. If we'd been working to rule at the point at that time, we wouldn't just never have got over the line. So yeah, that was important.
So that first one went out the door, and then what happened? You carried on doing more features, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it comes back to it just didn't finish. I had expected us to, to finish at that point, but in fact, getting it to the original scope, it took just much, much longer to really make sure that worked, to really turn what the brief was, to have that interpreted into what it actually could become, and then to have that as a user-friendly experience. I think actually what I do remember throughout that period, with the exception of that very first pilot, because we did get it on the App Store shortly afterwards, our clients never, ever knew what was going on underneath. The
Right.
people that were receiving the experience, they had no idea how complex and stressful and difficult it was. The end experience that they were receiving was phenomenal. We, in the background, were staying up all night to try and make things work. The interactive challenges weren't firing and triggering in quite the same way unless they were being manually delivered at 3 a.m. to our clients in the US. So I mean, we were literally staying up all night working on this thing. But the clients had a phenomenal experience. So again, I'm really, really proud of that. It was also vital because it would have made that startup period much harder if we'd had a negative impact
Yeah.
on the experience that we were delivering.
Absolutely. And then, so what's happened since then? I mean, obviously the product's become more stable, because that's what happens with software over time, and the ways of working have changed.
Yeah, enormously. One of the big ways that working, and I don't know if this happens anywhere now, is we used to do fixed price upgrades. So we used to say, right, we want to change this, we want to do an upgrade, and we would get a fixed price to go ahead and make that upgrade, which was great for us at that point because we could plan that, fit it into a budget and decide whether to go or not. I think it was less good for you guys sometimes. Sometimes it worked great for you guys. Sometimes I think it didn't work so well for you guys. And it was ultimately a bit of a source of contention between the two organizations because you guys were working too hard and we felt occasionally we were overpaying. So that didn't work. So one of the big changes that was coming in was working on time rather than fixed product. And that was a big change for us at the time, but I have to say it was the right change because what you and the team implemented at that point was a much more clear, visible understanding of who was doing what, when they were doing, and how long it was taking them. And prior to that, it was a bit opaque.
Yeah.
And we were taking things on trust. And so I think, I don't know, does anyone do that anymore? Or, I mean, it feels like the industry's moved away from that fixed price modeling. But
Well, it's an interesting question. Fixed price can work, but you have to have the right processes and ways of working internally to be able to deliver that. And not everything is a good idea to do fixed price. So there's some R&D. I mean, we were talking about that recently, right? There's certain parts of that you can do fixed price, but generally, if you're trying to do something that's never been done before, you can't really estimate it. There's different ways of working, but the important thing, and I tell this to everyone, is the context. Right, is the thing that really makes the decision. And I think in a life in a day's case, the journey has been one of, it's had its ups and downs. But, I think once we moved over to that time and licenses model, actually it's given you the transparency that you really need to understand what's going on. When's that, how are we going on that one? How are we doing on this one? And actually, I think with and there's always a bit of debate about, okay, that one took a little bit longer than we thought. Oh, that one took shorter than we thought. And generally they balance up. But the great thing about the relationship is the transparency, because that then builds the trust.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we have more transparency now over every single minute and every single activity. And where I thought that might be, I don't know, I was maybe a little resistant to that, Joel. I was resistant to that change initially because we were kind of set in our ways. It's been brilliant. And I think the team's working better than ever right now. We're also in a lovely position where, because we've been in a position of stability for several years now, the platform works, the tool works, it's absolutely fantastic. We have this lovely opportunity now to say, well, how do we make it better? And so I think, and that's a shared conversation. So we certainly come with things from internally, but what's really lovely is that you guys are constantly looking out for, oh, hey, have you thought about this? Maybe you could do that. So we're talking about use of AI at the moment, for example, and that's very much come from your team seeing opportunities to utilize other things that are out there to improve our service. So I think, that is a world away from 2018 when we started, where we really have a genuine partnership where you're kind of invested in helping us improve our product as well.
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely. I mean, the whole head channel team loves the product. They, and they love working on it because it makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's really nice to hear. And I guess, yes, you're right. And I have to say that's always been the case, that I think the team's been invested in it from that point of view because they see the value of it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they always loved working with us. As you say, there are ups and downs, but it's certainly right now. We did bring someone in-house. So as you know, we have Alfie, who is our liaison directly with you. And that was, I should have done that a lot earlier, to have someone in-house that can interpret the wider needs of our business, compress that, and then take that to the project manager that we're working with at your side. So I think their relationship is absolutely excellent. And they've clearly got the relationships within the two companies to be able to work together well. And that took a while, but it's a really good model.
Well, I think that's important. Things do take a while. It's not something that you can just engage a team and then they come on board and then everything works perfectly. There has to be an understanding and getting people together and understanding how everyone's going to work together. But once it's there, it feels good, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Alfie's is a really good temperature as well for how are things going, because when he's happy, it's like the whole company is happy because we know that our product's well looked after. So,
and the one other thing that you said earlier as well was get a fractional CTO in.
Yeah.
So I often say to prospects, have you got someone? Can you get a fractional CTO in? Because that does actually help, as well.
Oh, I would say it's absolutely, well, if you have the budget, it's vital.
Yeah.
Honestly, back in the day, I probably wouldn't have listened and probably wouldn't have had the money to do it and would have pursued it in the wrong way that I did. But if you possibly could, I'd change it. So as you know, we had a huge overhaul of the entire software, a couple of years ago. And at that point, was when we engaged the fractional CTO to come in and look at it. And it was brilliant because you had this outside experienced eye that put into context the complexity of what we were asked us some challenging questions as a business of, do you really need that? And is that really going to get it to you? Or have you thought about this? And what they then did was help us analyze your proposals and your responses to our needs, so that by the time the project started, we were already miles ahead in terms of understanding and expectations than we had been, previously. So it's invaluable, and we continue to work with the fractional CTO on an ad hoc basis now.
I hear from some teams that they're kind of, scared of that whole thing. But I think having an independent fractional CTO on your side to help you understand what the software shop team, dev team is saying, it just pays dividends.
It really does.
Really does.
Yeah, enormously so.
All right. Well, what's the future hold, Mark?
Yeah. So, I'm really excited about what we're doing, what we're looking at with AI. So I guess that's the obvious immediate future. But honestly, I think the future is to continue working in this partnership model. I have no intention of bringing all of the development in-house. And I used to think that was the logical conclusion, that once you had somebody make it, that you bring it in-house because that would somehow be cheaper or easier. And I absolutely don't think that's the idea. So I would say the future looks like a continued partnership with the right people to continue to evolve and build the product and look for ways to make it better. But, we're in a phenomenal position, and it's been an exciting if exhausting few years.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to get some rest.
Thanks.
But thanks, Mark. Honestly, it's been really great working with you, and really appreciate you taking the time to do this podcast. And some words of wisdom that I hope other people who listen to this, who've never pulled a software team together or have done anything like this, I hope that they will listen to those words and have a better outcome. And their hair won't go on fire and they won't run around screaming.
Thanks, Rich. It's been really nice to sort of think about it all again, actually, from this lovely position that we find ourselves in today. So thanks very much.
No problem. Great having you on. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Software Meets Business, the podcast sponsored by Head Channel. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your preferred platform.